Welcome to Fire University. This is a podcast dedicated to fire ecology and management within the Natural Resource University Podcast Network. My name is Dr. Marcus Lashley. I'm a wildlife biologist, an assistant professor of disturbance ecology at the University of Florida, and a lifelong hunter that's passionate about wildlife conservation and management. In this podcast, I will interview scientists and professionals not only on the latest research in fire ecology, but also about their experiences in hopes that you as the listeners can learn why fire ecology is important and also how you can use it to meet your natural resource management goals. So let's get to the burning questions in Fire University. Hey everybody, welcome back to Fire University. Today I'm getting the pleasure of sitting face-to-face with Dr. Will Gulsby.
A distinct pleasure.
Yeah, distinct pleasure. Well, it's been a while since we've gotten to sit down and talk face-to-face, and that goes with a lot of our research colleagues, in different places. We haven't been getting to visit face-to-face like this. And, technology like Zoom or we even listen to each other on podcasts from time to time, those kinds of things. We hear from each other, but it's nice to sit down and talk about things face to face again. So glad to have you on the show. I know our audience has heard from you before, and if you want to, maybe you could just remind them, where you're at and kind of a little bit of background about what you do.
Yeah, I'm an associate professor at Auburn University, and I would say that habitat management is kind of one of the major themes that ties a lot of my work together. But I've had a lot of particular emphasis on habitat management, particularly forest management for deer and turkeys as of late, and enjoy talking about anything related to that, whether it be, using fire, silvicultural prescriptions or herbicides, to try to achieve those desired conditions across the landscape to complement various aspects of deer life history or turkey life history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today. A lot of the folks, at least I don't get emailed much of folks telling me they don't want to hear about deer and turkeys. Yeah. But I do get a fair amount from people saying they want to hear more about them. So we're going to assume that most of the people want to hear more about deer and turkeys. And I know that you do a lot of great work with those species and have a passion for those. I guess when this is coming out, it's middle of the summer. It's pretty hot, kind of in between seasons for stuff to hunt. Maybe there's some folks out there passionate about fishing or something at this time. But it's kind of a lull in activity. Yeah. And I wanted to kind of pitch you the softball, at least for you, of what could they be thinking about right now? Given the climate conditions of being in the summer and the timing in terms of the benefits that they could gain from different practices, what could they be thinking about right now that they could accomplish maybe before deer season comes in?
Sure. So we talked about just a little while ago some things that you can do. One of the things that I always think of when it's too hot and humid to be anywhere away from water is, what can I do to kind of limit my exposure to those elements? I don't want to be out, all day running a chainsaw or something like that, although I have, and I will when I need to, but, can you just kind of hunt and peck across the property and maybe tackle some of your invasives issues? I'm talking about, scattered plants, with limited coverage. Like, do you have some Sericea lespedeza here and there? Do you have some multiflora rose? Do you have some bicolor lespedeza? Things like
Japan
that.
Grass, that's one I deal with all the time.
Kogan grass is a big one. Climbing fern is a big one. Yeah. So those types of things where maybe, you have an ATV, or you can even just throw a backpack sprayer in the back of your truck if you don't have one, and you can drive around to various spots. And so you get a little bit of time to cool off between, treating each area, and you're not out there in the sun, throughout the whole day. Those are the kind of things that I start thinking about. And then also, I think you always need to be thinking about longer term plans and what are the things that I need to set in motion now that may not pay off for several months. For example, like, you maybe have some trees that are coming into marketable size, and you know that you want to thin the canopies of those trees to create deer forage, turkey nesting habitat, turkey brood rearing habitat. A lot of times, from the time that you contact your forester and you start planning that sale to the time that you've actually got loggers on the ground can be quite a while. So thinking about those things, or maybe you've already got a timber harvest slated and you're just waiting for that dry weather for the loggers to move in or something along those lines.
Yeah. All great activities. One of the things that sort of stuck out to me and it got me thinking down a similar path. I talk a lot about early succession and trying to have brood patches or depending on where you're at, you call it different things, but just some early successional plant communities that are beneficial for nesting or brooding, deer forage and cover and fawning.
I think that's a great point, because what I see myself doing and a lot of the folks that I talk to with similar interests doing is we don't tend to visit the properties that we hunt, own, or manage much this time of year. Maybe you've got a fishing pond or something like that. So you do. There are some exceptions, certainly, but a lot of us aren't going out there and looking on the ground for what's actually available to the critters that we're interested in providing habitat for this time of year.
Yeah, we're really only engaging the species when we're trying to hunt.
Exactly. And they need it. They don't take these days off.
Right.
So,
and it's hot.
It's hot.
Which is why we're talking about staying out of the sun. We need them to be able to stay out of the sun.
Exactly. So it's an important time of the year to go out and do a checkup on your property, see what is available for deer to eat, see what's available for a lot of those young poults are still really small this time of year, see what's available for them for bugging habitat, for seed producing forbs.
Well, one thing that's really good about the timing related to that when you're checking up, like right now, you can still, at least through mid-June probably, and for most of our listeners, if you have brood fields in their that's a good time to see are they covered up with cool season grass like Italian ryegrass or something that you don't want in it.
Right.
And you can see and get prepared because this fall is when it's going to be time to hit that cool season grass, and it's not going to be as obvious during the fall as it is right now, where you can see all those dead plants with seed heads sticking up, or a lot of our warm season grasses. Bahia is the one that I just see everywhere. You see a forked seed head, you probably see Bahia around the south, and it's just blowing up right now, and you can see really easily where it is and identify where some problems are that you might want to get involved with herbicide.
That's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought it up because I meant to mention it, but had forgotten about it. Is when I'm out there walking around the woods during turkey season, early spring, I get intimidated by identifying a lot of plants. Especially grasses that are just emerging.
And you're the expert.
Well,
plants now. Come on now.
I do it all the time, and I teach it, but I still get intimidated by it. And what in that early growing season period. But now as we're getting into June, July, August, a lot of those structures, flowering structures and things like that, some plants start forming seeds that make them much more easy to identify. And that's the time to be going out there and maybe performing some of that eradication, some of that spot treatment, or at least, like you said, if the window of time for that has already passed this year, put that on your to-do list for next year, so that when it's susceptible during early spring, you can go out there and treat it and know where it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, and I certainly haven't appreciated it as much as I should, and I think it's important to point out. And as someone, just recently over in the Red Hills region and taking students around and showing them how to manage brood fields, which is really common practice for folks in quail country. And a lot of the fields were just overrun with Italian ryegrass. And that gave me the opportunity not only for them to see, what it looks like when it goes to seed, but also, how it affects the structure and different things. And then we talked through, okay, what's the plan? How do you get that back into your forb dominance with plants that you're looking for quail?
Sure.
I think that would apply
elsewhere. When things are seeding or flowering, like you're saying, it's much easier to identify them.
Yeah.
Another thing that I have grown to appreciate, I know you saw online, I posted a picture of some hen scat and some seeds that I found in it during turkey season. And now I'm getting pictures from folks asking what seeds are. And I have a couple of folks in the lab that are extraordinarily good with seed identification. So
you created a crew of scat diggers.
Yeah, scat diggers. So people are sending me pictures. Like I just got one yesterday of somebody had a hen scat that was purple.
Yeah.
And they took a picture and they were like, why is it purple? Is it because they're eating blackberries? And I was like, yes. And I can say that definitively because you could zoom in and those seeds, those are blackberry seeds.
Yeah.
But the point of all that is, this is a time where the turkeys are eating things that are very important for their life history.
Yeah.
You can get out there, and even though you may not be harvesting a bird where you can look at its crop, you can still get information about what they're doing and what they're using and eating.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really cool. If you're probably going to see a bunch of stuff that you don't know what it is, especially if it's seeds, but you start to get a pretty good handle on that. And one thing that I do all the time, and it's probably just weird of me, given the context that we're talking about digging around in scat, that's weird enough. But like I walk around, if I see something fruiting, I grab. If I don't know what the seed looks like, I grab it and look at the seed.
Right.
And I've even started taking some back because one of the students in my lab's gotten really interested in making like a seed library.
Yeah.
And we've got, I don't even know how many species in there now, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But like, that's how I figure this stuff out. Like I'm just constantly looking at the fruits on different things. It's like, oh, I didn't know that's what that plant was based on the flower. And then, this one's actually got a seed pod on it. I'm going to see what the seed looks like. And then next thing I know, I'm finding it in turkey scat or something like that. And, everybody has that opportunity to get out there during this time.
It's an intensive process, but if you think about it, that can be super valuable because you can really dovetail it into a 3-step process where, step one, you figure out what are they eating this time of year. And then the next logical step is how much of it do I have out there?
Yeah.
Do I have, is it readily available throughout my entire property at high coverage or is it a very limited resource? And if it's a very limited resource, then the next natural step is figure out how I can create more of that. What are the conditions that are lacking? Is it a sunlight factor? Is it a disturbance frequency factor?
Yeah.
Is it an invasive exclusion factor that's limiting abundance and coverage of that species across the landscape? And then step 3 is the step 4 process. Step 4 is actually putting that on the ground and trying to expand it out because there's so many important things that are happening in the biology and life history of both turkeys and deer this time of year that it can have a tremendous impact to have that high quality summer forage available to them, especially on what you're hunting in fall and what you're hunting in spring next year.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. You and I have really gone to an extreme with it, but we're all curious and, you're really interested in these species you're interacting with from whatever perspective, whether you're a bird watcher or you like to catch snakes or whatever, it doesn't matter. There's some inherent curiosity associated with that, just becoming a lifelong learner and realizing you can get this information that's specific to your property on your own. You just have to, think about how fun it is to learn about them.
Well, and now's a better time than ever to try to do that because we've got all of these machine learning apps where you can take photos, especially when those flowering or fruiting structures are present. They do a pretty good job of at least getting you to the right genus on that plant identification. And, people shouldn't be disheartened if they identify a plant one time using an app or a book or whatever they use, or maybe even sending a picture to one of us or someone else that is in the know on that and forgetting it. If you forget it that first time, that's fine. I do the same thing. Like I'll have every summer, I feel like there's a plant that I take a picture of and I go back and look through my roll and I had the same plant that I forgot from last year. But sometimes that's what it takes is just that repetition.
Well, no, you probably experience the same thing that I do I teach the habitat course at the end of May each year, and a large portion of that is plant identification. And I get out there, and I not only do I not remember some of the natural history about the plants, sometimes I also forget what the plant is. Because it takes practice, to kind of keep after it, or you'll lose that information. And I think it's a great opportunity right now when we normally wouldn't be out there because it's miserable. But you can get a lot of information from a lot of the things that are important to the species we're interested in. If you do,
if you keep your curiosity up, you're going to be a better manager. You keep your curiosity up, you're going to turn into a naturalist. And I know some naturalists that don't even have degrees in natural resources or related fields. That
some of the best
are exceptional.
So,
I mean, you continue to build that knowledge is only going to improve your land management abilities and ability also to evaluate plant community responses to whatever disturbance factor you introduce or how often you introduce it, and to start to see that nuance and understanding how you can shift that prescription one way or another, depending on what you're trying to make more of.
Well, I'm going to throw you a curveball right here and put you on the spot.
Fair enough.
So one thing that I think it is worthwhile for us to talk about, at least bring it up and just get it out there so that people are thinking about it. I also see a fair amount, and I love this. So if y'all have pictures or something, you want to share it with us on social media or whatever. I love looking through all the seeds and all these turkeys that people are harvesting or whatever. But I see it pretty commonly where there'll be stuff packed full of Bahia grass seeds or something like that. It's not necessarily desirable. But that doesn't mean that you don't find it commonly in the diet. So what about that situation? If you we could stick with turkeys, or you can talk about whatever species.
I would say don't confuse use with value.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. How do you deal with that? Ask an expert, or is there an app for that? Maybe we should make an app for that.
So, it's the use by an animal of a plant is, dependent on several things. One is what are its current dietary requirements? And they're going to be seeking, plants that are higher in proteins during some parts of the year, and plants that are higher in energy, meaning carbohydrates and fats during certain times of the year. And then from there, they're also going to be looking for things that are palatable. What do they want to eat? What has a good mouthfeel, or what doesn't have a bunch of secondary compounds that are designed to reduce herbivory, like tannins. So that's going to factor in as well. And then availability. And with something like Bahia grass, it can be so available on some properties that you're seeing extensive use of it. But that doesn't mean that if you were to go in there and convert an old field full of Bahia grass to a native grass forward community, that you wouldn't see that use shift. And not only would you see higher use of other plants, but it could be that they're even more nutritious than the Bahia grass that they've replaced.
I think we pretty well have that information. It is more valuable.
That's right.
We know that for a fact, and it is higher selected, but that doesn't change the fact that if you have, I don't know, let's just make something up, 15% of your property, and I'm going to do quotes that Will can see, but y'all can't, in early succession, 15% of your property is in early succession, but that early succession is actually 90% plus biomass of a non-native
Bermuda grass or
grass,
grass or
pretty much any grass, really, if you're talking about deer. But that you might find it in let's say 50% of their diet. You could see something like that where it's making up a substantial portion of their diet, and it's because it's 90% of what's available. So that's kind of getting at that use versus availability thing you were talking about. You might actually see a high proportion of the diet in an item because it's so dominant in terms of what's available.
Right.
And then if you actually compare the two, it's like, well, it's 50% of the diet, but it's 95% of what's available, then they're actually avoiding that.
Yeah.
They just can't. They can't not eat it because it's so dominant.
And here's another aspect of that I think is really interesting that a lot of people, even myself included, sometimes don't think about as much as we should, is going beyond the food value of whatever that plant is, and also thinking about how does it affect the animal's energy levels and survival probability. So maybe Bahia grass, let's just pretend for a minute that Bahia grass is a great summer forage. Bahia grass seed is a great summer forage for turkeys. Okay, fine.
Put bookends on that picture before and after. Maybe during sometime you discount that. But because somebody's going to use that little snippet say, see, I told you.
Okay, well we can just go back and edit that out completely. Let's just be real generic here, okay? Let's cut that out, okay? Let's just say that there's this plant out there. It's a non-native plant. It's receiving a lot of use by turkeys on your property. They're eating a lot of the seed during the summertime, and you're finding it in scats. It's got high coverage and distribution across your property. So it may be great from a food resource perspective, but it's not. If it's a mat forming grass, for example, it could be impeding the movement of the young turkeys, requiring them to expend more energy to consume that food resource because it doesn't facilitate movement. It's limiting abundance of insects that they still need that are very important to their diets. And it's also not providing good cover from aerial predators or really terrestrial predators, and it's slowing them up as they try to escape those predators.
Especially when they're little.
So even if we do start by assuming that you've got high coverage of an invasive plant that is good from a nutritional perspective for one animal or another, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have significant negative consequences elsewhere for that animal's physiology.
I think that's important.
Or behavior.
It's more than just about food.
Yeah, that could outweigh its positive benefits as a forage item.
Yeah. Well, and I think with turkeys and quail would be an even more extreme example of this. Turkeys, you're going to see a hen out in the Bahia pasture with her poults. If that is the only early succession available, she must use that.
I've got Bahia pastures on my drive to work that I pass all the time and see turkeys out there.
But you're kind of making the point that may be a high proportion of their diet and then maybe a high proportion of their use because they need that early succession, but the structure associated with it and then the things that come with that structure, whether it be the thermal refuge or predator refuge, the energy expenditure, energy gain, the efficiency of all those things. You're not getting to see that.
Another great example of that I think of a lot is if you drive through heavily forested areas, pretty regularly at dawn, dusk, and night, you'll see deer foraging on the roadside because that's the only place that they've got those early successional plant species present. But I think we could all agree that we don't want our deer that we're trying to, either from the does we're trying to, they're producing next year's herd, or for the bucks that we're trying to harvest or grow to older age classes before harvest, spending time by road.
Your 170-inch buck to be hanging out on the roadside where everybody can see it. Right in the evening when people are getting off work.
I mean, it doesn't take a PhD to realize that's probably not a good strategy for keeping that buck for another year or till hunting season comes back in.
Leave it to a PhD to say it doesn't take a PhD. Well, I mean, we're kind of integrating some things. Some things seem obvious and they're really not. And then there are other things that seem obvious and they actually are obvious when you really start to dig around in it. But that's one thing going back to the use I encounter frequently, and I assume that you do as well, where people will be like, hey, what's this? This turkey was full of grass seeds. What is it? It's like, it was paspalum. I'm not sure if it was Bahia grass or Vasey's grass or
Florida paspalum.
Florida.
That would be a little bit easier to tell because of big seeds. But
so like there's a bunch of options that it could be. I can't tell from your photo, but what I immediately am thinking, okay, they're going to think we need to be planting Bahia grass for turkeys to eat the seeds. And it's like, no, it was kind of the opposite. They don't have other options. So
the places where the seeds that they would prefer over Bahia grass would normally grow they've been excluded from because you have high coverage of that one or any other number of exotic invasives.
Right. And right now, it's like in full-blown seed mode. If you go to your early succession, you'll know, obviously, if it's pasture, but in some cases, people might actually be trying to manage for a native old field community. And right now, you can see like what proportion of the biomass in that plant community is actually something like that you don't want in it.
Yeah.
And you can target it if it's not much, or plan for, some sort of renovation if needed, if it's dominating. But I think, that's one thing I've talked about a lot here in the recent past is kind of have this affinity for grass. Naturally, people do.
It draws your eye.
Yeah. And, a lot of people will just think, okay, I'm just going to stop mowing the pasture and let it grow up. And then that's my thing right there. Yeah. It's like, well, if you go and look under that, it's all still the mat forming grass. It's still causing the same issues. It's better because it has some of the native stuff encroaching and
deer, deer can go out and forage pretty well and bed down and everything like that. But we should be trying to move that towards something better.
Right. Right. You have opportunity to increase production. And I mean, I would rather have three poults per hen than 2 poults per hen. And, those kinds of things they start to stack up, especially things that get them through that first little window of life where they're super vulnerable.
And I think if you feel as a landowner or, someone that is even leasing land and you maybe got some areas on that land that you're able to manage and manipulate a little bit, it can be intimidating at first to start to tackle all these different ideas that we throw out about, whether it be commercial timber harvest or, stem injection for forest stand improvement or converting old fields, all that kind of stuff. But just maybe start small. Start by not mowing that field that you mowed, 2 to 3 times a summer, and let those be your incremental steps that cause you to become more hungry to take it further. You don't have to fix it all today. And oftentimes you can't fix it all today, but each step that you make towards improvement is obviously better. Yeah,
it's good stuff. I think one value in doing that is I hear it commonly and get asked about it. It's like, well, it's been Bahia for 60 years. There's not anything good in there in the seed bank to come of it. So just taking one little patch and doing that and seeing, oh, okay. Yeah. It turns out these seeds have figured out a way to get there if they're not in the seed bank.
Right.
If it's close enough in proximity.
Well, fortunately, a lot of those early successional plants are small seeded and they're designed to quickly occupy these newly available areas as they can colonize it.
Some of them have, especially our hard seeded forbs, there's some of them that can sit there forever.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even know how long.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Good species and bad species can sit there forever.
Yeah. And so I know you could definitely get into that same issue.
Right. I know we didn't mean to turn this into an old field management discussion, but here we are. But
well, it's just such an important missing factor.
It is
most of the landscape.
Well, I without a doubt, especially as it pertains to turkeys, I feel like one of the best things that we can do right now is maximize brooding cover.
Yeah.
The amount and the distribution, having it well distributed across the landscape, so those hens aren't having to travel long distances with their poults and risk that predation. But
they need to be able to have a nest anywhere on your property and be within 100 yards.
Absolutely.
Like that.
Absolutely. And
everywhere they nest. So think about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look at a map of your property, and if you can start drawing lines where they've got to go several hundred yards, 400 or 500 yards to reach a good brooding site. If they nested in one portion of your property, then that's a problem that you need to try to start remedying. Right. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that you were talking about, we could start to approach that. We kind of transition away from the old field. They can raise poults in other places. That's one they do particularly well in. But one of the things that we talked about earlier with forest stand improvement, you may even have an opportunity where maybe you've got part of the property that's hard to access, or you just don't have any openings to work with. And you don't have much opportunity from a timber harvesting standpoint to do that even. There could be something that you could accomplish with some of these forest stand improvement practices.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. And, we've done a little bit I've done in my lab a little bit of forest stand improvement research, in collaboration with Dr. Harper.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that in some coastal plain hardwood systems. That was Mark Turner's graduate research project.
Mm-hmm.
And, they could go out in a team of 2 guys. Now, granted, these are guys in their early 20s,
Mm-hmm.
working
Strong
on their graduate, working on their graduate research, but they could go out, one man running the chainsaw to girdle the trees and another guy with the squirt bottle behind him. They could treat about 2 acres a day and increase canopy openness by 30 to 40%.
Mm-hmm.
But just because that's possible doesn't mean you have to do it. Consistency is key in all this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this as well as I do. It's more important that you do it regularly in small steps versus, and I would rather see someone go out to a property and make 2 to 5% improvements over time, and it take them several years to get to the point that they really want the property to get to, than to go out and give themselves heat exhaustion working one day from sunup to sundown in June or July. Mm-hmm. And so I say all that because that stem injection for forest stand improvement is one of those things that you can pick at a little bit. And so maybe, I go out, I stay at my property, I get up right at sunrise, and my goal for that day is to just go out and treat 20, 25 trees in this area where I'm trying to increase sunlight to the ground. And then I hang it up. I'm done. I go back, I eat my breakfast,
I mean, maybe you could kind of pair that with other things like, okay, I'm going to have this little corridor where I'm going to treat a bunch of trees on the way into this stand that I need to check out, make sure it's in good shape or whatever. And then you're accomplishing several things at once, but you're biting it off one bite at a time rather than trying to eat the whole thing.
Right.
I think that's an important. I definitely run into that, especially it seems like with timber harvest. Like people don't want, and I understand. I'm one of those people. I don't like the crew to be in my property constantly.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily something you want to do all at once.
Yeah.
Like everywhere, you're blanket applying a practice to a large acreage. That's not necessarily the best approach to do things. There's a lot of value in the variability that comes with it.
Absolutely.
A little bit at a time.
There's a lot of value in that variability, that diversity that we talk about, and you have other people talk about on your podcast all the time. But what you've also done at the same time, when you take that approach of changing large acreages at once, is you've also suddenly just created a situation where you're going to have to implement a lot of disturbance at once going forward. That's all going to be on the same timeline. And so it's all going to come due for fire at the same time, or it's all going to come due for herbicide application or whatever else it needs.
Yeah, unless you have a small property, that's not necessarily the best approach.
Yes.
1,000 acres all under the same prescription with the same timing is not necessarily a good thing.
Right. But that's, one of the things that I've talked about several times before too is with landowners in fire. Many landowners don't burn because fire makes them nervous, whether it has to do with the liability associated with it, the timber damage that could associate, with it, or just getting out or whatever, it can be intimidating to start if you don't have experience with it. But that gives you an opportunity to start small too, And so, okay, I only got 3 acres this year that I treated with forest stand improvement techniques. Well, that's what I've got to burn next year, And so once you accumulate that acreage over time, you're at the same time building your experience level and comfort with fire. And so once your property eventually gets to where you've got significant acreages that are ready to be treated with it, your experience level is commensurate with that amount that needs to be treated.
Yeah, that's a good point. As you sort of tick away at it, you get more and more done.
Yeah.
You have more and more requirements, but you're also getting more and more capable and confident.
And my favorite thing that I've ever heard anyone say about, small scale burning, and particularly when it's starting out on a small scale, but, to increase your level of comfort and familiarity with it is, when Craig Harper said one time, it's like, how much is it, or actually he posed the question, is it worth burning 1, 2, 3 acres at a time? And his answer to that, he answered himself, his rhetorical question. It's like, how much time do we spend on a 1, 2, or 3 acre food plot?
Yeah.
A lot of time, a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people, they're only engaging their property at this time of the year because of that practice.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're willing to spend the kind of time and money that you are on a small food plot, many times less than an acre, why wouldn't we spend that kind of time why wouldn't we feel like it was a valuable use of our time to do it on a few acres with fire? Yeah. Now, you're not going to have the same forage density, like as you would in a clover food plot, as you would in a similar acreage in the woods, but you got a lot more of that wooded acreage to work with.
Yeah.
So it balances out.
Even in the fields, having some of those fields be native plant community, of a lot of our valuable forbs, you may not compete with the amount of forage available,
right?
Although you can,
right?
You can certainly spend just as much time on it, and you could gain a lot of other things out of it that you're not going to get out of food, that cover aspects in particular, but
and benefits to a wider array of wildlife.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can. The early succession provide substantial benefits for all of these species that we're interested in, not just deer.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think that's definitely an important aspect of it. And if you like to ride around on a tractor, you brought up Craig. He always says something along these lines. But if you just need to ride around on a tractor, ride around on it and spot spray plants that you don't want.
Just mix up a 5% solution of glyphosate.
Like if you just need to ride around on a tractor, a lot of people, I feel like that, they want something to do. So look, we're just redirecting that effort into a practice that could be a little more beneficial to a wider range of species.
Or maybe you just bought your new side-by-side or utility tractor this summer, and you just got to get out there and justify that purchase.
Yeah, exactly.
Hook up the sprayer to it, or heck, on a 4-wheeler, even put on a backpack on yourself and just go around and spot spray that stuff. Yeah,
and you can get a lot out of that because you start to see, some of those patches fill in. I've heard Craig advocate, if you have patches of stuff that you're trying to get rid of, go out there and kill it. And then you've got a little patch that you can burn off.
Yeah.
And you'll get a flush of good stuff, and you start creating a diversity and structure even within a field.
Oh, absolutely. Because, you can think about it. If you go into a field that hasn't been disturbed in 3 years, and then, this year I go and spot spray, let's say at the beginning of spring or beginning of summer, well, then I've got year 3 early successional plants. I've got a lot of perennials in that plant community, right?
Yeah.
Right next to those brand new annuals that pop up right after I spray whatever was there that I wanted to get rid of.
Yeah.
So I've got year 0 and year 3 plants next to each other. And maybe I even, going back in time, maybe I spot sprayed some last year. So now I've got year 0, year 1, year 3, and you can just keep building that diversity.
Yeah, you could end up with a really nice mosaic of plant community composition and structure associated with that.
Which, especially if you're managing for relatively generalist species like deer and turkeys, is probably going to benefit them.
Yeah, give them the choices right next to each other to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a really good way to think about this. And you can do the same, you can apply this to different land cover types.
Sure.
Depending on what you have on your place. But, we've been rambling on a while. We hadn't talked that much about fire, but I think that's okay.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted to bring it up or not, because we opened this by saying avoiding the heat.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about burning during the hottest time of the year. I don't know if we want to go down that road or not.
Well, I've certainly carried a torch plenty.
Yeah.
And I love to get students experience doing that during this summer course, the habitat course. And that's a lot of them, that's their only experience with it. And, in Florida, we're at the end of May, it's already pretty hot and miserable. And we're not lighting up until 11 or something. And, this past year, because of the conditions, we lit at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That was when.
Nice.
And, it was we were like peak heat at that point. But, we had a lot of fun. We had some native ground cover that did really well. But,
we still
had a lot of fun. I guess was the whole point of all that rambling I just did. We still had a lot of fun, and a lot of those students saw the value, and they're going to take that with them and start applying it to broader acreages, which is what we need.
Well, it has that huge advantage that I think you correctly emphasize a lot of times on your social media accounts is that, expand the burn window.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need to be closed-minded to burn this time of the year for that reason. And that reason, I think is justification enough. But I teach a summer, it's a field. I mean, it has habitat components into it, but it's kind of a summer field techniques course. And I'm down there 2 weeks in Andalusia, Covington County. It's right on the Florida line. It's far south as you can go in Alabama without being in Florida. And we burn some years during, the middle of May. And it can be tough. But the piece of advice that I would give to burners that are just now maybe starting to branch out from the traditional dormant season fire into the growing season is if you can get a couple of people to help you out, minimum number of 3, you can have one person lighting, one person patrolling, and then one person sitting in a truck and air conditioning, just being there. You only come out as needed, and you can rotate through. And I was
wondering if you were going to get to the rotate.
Yeah.
Are you the one that just sits in there?
I forgot to tell them about the rotate part conveniently. But
no, this is how we do it. I sit in there.
Yeah. But if you can get, and maybe you don't need to do that if you're burning a small acreage, but if it's going to take a while, that's what I recommend is, let one person cool down, and then the person that's patrolling, they've got air moving by them if they're on any kind of vehicle. So it'll minimize the risk of heat injury, and just the one person lighting and just rotate through that.
Yeah. Make it an opportunity for camaraderie or family time or whatever your situation is. There's a lot of value just in accomplishing stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I think it increases the enjoyment of your property to do things during all times of the year. Ultimately, you learn more about your property.
Yeah,
it becomes better over time. And
I know that some of that stuff, like we were just talking about, is eye-opening because the majority of my interaction growing up was during hunting season with the animals and what was going on the landscape, the plants. And I can remember it was right after I went to Tennessee to work with Craig, and I had gotten this crash course in plants. And then I went home after that first summer of field work, and I knew probably hundreds of species of plants really well, where they were beating into my head. And I went out on our property, and I was like, wow, okay, this is the same genus. I don't know that species, but I know that's the right genus. And then there's a whole bunch of plants that I was like, man, I didn't even know they were here. I've been thinking, that I'm learning all this new stuff that doesn't even apply to where I grew up. And then I go home and it's 90% overlap.
And it makes you appreciate what you have that much more.
Yeah.
Especially for those of you that, buy property specifically to be recreational hunting tracts. And maybe, let's say you deer and turkey hunt. So depending on where you are, you may be in the woods from September, October through the beginning or end of January. And that leaves from, or I guess I said turkey too. So, so maybe September, October through May, right? But June, July, August, you don't get much enjoyment out of that property, but these are ways that you potentially could.
Yeah. I being a plant geek now, I guess, I really like to see all this stuff in there.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that just tickles me is to see what all the deer eat.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, look at this. They're tearing this pokeweed up.
Yeah.
And then just plants like that, just seeing the use of them is really gratifying.
Well, a lot of hunters, especially, as we mature, we talk about the benefits that we get out of hunting. And, we move from early on to just the harvest to it being a more holistic experience and enjoying being in nature. And I think, working on a property to improve it during the summertime really adds to that experience while adding to, the quality of your property for the species that you're after too.
Yeah. And where I grew up, we'd go out and do something. A lot of times it was baling hay or something that wasn't very fun, but then we'd go to the river after.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that made me appreciate the river after out there baling hay or something. But
maybe you can jump in the river after you burn now, or spray some invasives.
Yeah, exactly. Turn these into opportunities to enhance your enjoyment of the whole thing. And, just think about, if we're managing especially for some of these components of community that's missing, like early succession, like we're talking about, you can gain a huge amount for a lot of species and take satisfaction in the fact that they're benefiting from that, but also, just have that more intact understanding of what your property is providing and the values that you can get out of it. I think it all plays into that, and I've certainly gained value from it.
And personally, my kids have really enjoy it, and they get a lot out of it too. I mean, not my 2-year-old, but obviously my 7-year-old. My 2-year-old, he just enjoys riding the side by side. My daughter enjoys that too, but she's learning more. So I'll take them down. Most people at this point in time are running trail cameras still all summer. So if you're going to go out and check trail cameras, if you have your herbicide with you too, to spot spray some of those invasives that you started to learn, you can make that part of the process. And you load up your kid. I'll load up my kids, and we'll go to check a trail camera, and I'll spot spray some sericea or something here and there, whatever I'm targeting. And my daughter has really learned a lot and come to appreciate, the relationship between wildlife and plants through that. And she's like, well, why are you spraying that plant but not that one? And they get all about it.
Mine's just a little behind yours, but same kind of thing. She's getting to the point where she knows what the bird, she knows not only that it's a bird, but she knows which one.
Yeah.
And then she's starting to call out plants.
Yeah.
It was just not that long ago. She knew what a seed, like which seed it was.
Yeah.
Not that it was just a seed, but which plant it came from.
Yeah.
So I was really proud of that.
That's so cool.
She's, that inherent curiosity, and this, I think there's a lot of value in that, and trying to pass the torch to the next generation, just cultivating that.
And this time of year, it's low stakes. It's laid back. You don't have to worry about them being loud or, disturbing, your target buck or whatever. And so it's a good time to get them out to enjoy it as well. Yeah.
It's good stuff. Well, I guess we've been rambling on for a while now. Is there any take-home messages or anything that you want to leave people with?
Manage year-round.
It's a year-round process.
Always, if you don't feel like there's anything that you can be doing at a given time point in the year, dig deeper, because there almost always is. There's almost always something you can do to be improving. And, depending on your perspective, that could be a good thing or bad thing. If you want more to do, you can find it. If you don't, be careful where you look, because you will find it.
Well, and whatever you are doing, take a step back and evaluate, is that the best use of your time and effort? Maybe you could better use your time.
Always. And that's one thing that we didn't mention is like post-fire evaluation is a good time of year to do it, because but for the plant ID reasons that we mentioned earlier.
But you can evaluate how successful did I kill all the woody stuff I was trying to, or
that's what we don't do so often is, maybe I've been burning this area every 3 years during January, February, with the goal of decreasing woody species coverage in that stand. And you go out there this time of the year, and that's the most evident time for you to check that out and see, is it having its intended effect, or do I need to change something up to make sure that I better meet that objective? Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. And I guess one last thing that I'll add to it before we go, I think about this a lot, and what people you're getting your next generation of managers involved with your kids or nephews or granddaughters or whatever. Think about what you value and where that came from. Right. And a lot of that came from people with their parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles or whoever spending that time out there doing things. And I know that a lot of things have been ingrained in me that I really value, and I want to pass that along. And I think that's an important thing for us to keep in perspective. Yeah. What's going to happen with the next generation. Yeah. And a lot of what influences those experiences to be positive is not necessarily that it translates into 10 more inches of antler on the buck that you kill next year, but rather that you're spending time with them and they have those fond memories of going out and doing that fun type of thing. And
those are remembering that, we used to do this.
Yeah. Those are the experiences they seek more than anything. And the harvest is a bonus on top of that, obviously.
Yeah. Great if that comes from it. But I think I certainly do it, and I see it plenty online. I think about the value of getting my kids out hunting. And that's valuable. Yeah. And I think a lot of us think about that as the value that we're passing that passion. But what about all the other parts of it? The effort that you can go in to improve the habitat on your property for all these species and the intrinsic value that comes from that. And you kind of have this side effect that the hunting experience could be enhanced.
Yeah. And the level I think it holds true across not just wildlife and habitat management, but almost anything we do as people is the level of effort that you put into something is positively related to the level of enjoyment that you get out of the end result. In this case, it's the harvest, right? You kill the turkey or you kill the deer, and you value that experience much more so when you've got that sweat equity put into it on a property that you either own or get to manage and hunt versus we know this, right? We know that versus if I pay an outfitter and I show up and I shoot a buck the next day, there's nothing wrong with that. And I've done it, but I don't appreciate that as much as the buck that I harvest that's been eating the plants that I was out there on a day with 92 degree, air temperatures and 80% humidity, working to provide food for.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. There's a lot of intrinsic value associated with all that stuff. But, all right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely.
Been, like always, great conversation, good fun. Hope everybody out there appreciates it. And we're serious. If you see some seeds or something, you want to know what they are, you know where to find us. You can send either one of us a message. What was your handle? I guess Instagram's where you're...
Yeah, Instagram's where I'm most active and where, is probably best place to access my content, which is Dr. Will Gulsby, and that's Dr.Will _Gulsby, which is Gulsby.
Okay. Well, we'll provide that in the show notes as well if people want to click on that. Yeah. Send Will some of your seed pictures and see how good he is at identifying them.
And hey, if you want to post some stories or some reels of you out there doing some of the things that we talked about today during June and July, making it into that,
I love year-round seeing that. I share everything that people send to me because I love just seeing them out there engaged and getting it done. Making turkeys and deer and everything else.
Is there a hashtag for that yet? Like year-round management or something like that?
No, we could probably make one up.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll take, the guest poll.
Yeah.
What should be the hashtag?
There we go.
And tag us and post all your stuff under that hashtag. We'll see.
I love seeing it. Seeing it.
Yeah, we need to share that kind of information, get people involved in this process as much as possible. So,
absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate it. We'll have you on again sometime soon. Hopefully, we'll talk about something else.
All right. Enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Fire University is part of the Natural Resource University Podcast Network, funded by the Renewable Resources Extension Act. If you like what you heard today in this episode, please follow us on all the social media platforms at UF Deer Lab.